Imagine building a $100 million empire, controlling over 15,000 apartment units, and achieving global fame with more than 40 million books sold, all while carrying $1 billion in debt. To some, he's a financial genius. To others, just a course seller, or even a scammer. This is the controversial story of Robert Kiyosaki. How, through bankruptcies, criticism, and countless controversies, he built, or maybe invented, his financial empire. Robert Kiyosaki was born into the heart of a middle-class family. His father, Ralph H. Kiyosaki, was a respected educator and school superintendent, a man who firmly believed that the key to success was having a secure job and living a financially stable life. His mother, Marjorie, was a nurse and, like many women of her time, dedicated herself mainly to raising the kids and taking care of the home. And honestly, that's about all we know for sure about his early life, because everything that comes after, that's Kiyosaki's version of the story. And while many have questioned how true it really is, he's never publicly admitted that any part of it was made up. Young Robert went to the local public school where he met his best friend Mike. What started out as a regular childhood friendship would end up becoming one of the biggest influences in his life. As Kiyosaki shares in his best-selling book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it was through Mike that he met the man who would completely change how he saw money and the world. Mike's father, the man he would come to call his rich dad. It was during his childhood that Robert was introduced to two completely different ways of looking at the world. One from his own father, Ralph, who he would later call his poor dad, and the other from Mike's father, his rich dad. Ralph Kiyosaki embodied traditional values. He worked his entire life chasing the kind of stability he believed only a good education and a steady job could provide. Success to him meant good grades, respect, and a safe career. He saw investing as too risky and warned his son to stay away from entrepreneurship. Meanwhile, Robert's rich dad offered a very different perspective. A local businessman with income from multiple ventures, he introduced young Robert to ideas like assets, liabilities, investments, and the kind of financial freedom most people only dream about. By age 9, Robert was absorbing lessons that clashed with everything he'd heard at home. That's when he made a decision that would change the course of his life. He chose to follow his rich dad's path. Under his mentorship, Robert and Mike launched their first business. And even though those early steps were shaky, Robert was determined to become an entrepreneur, driven by a dream of financial freedom that only a rich dad could teach. He and Mike decided to make lead coins, convinced they could get rich quick. One problem? They were making counterfeit money. It was Ralph, his poor dad, who stepped in and stopped them, reminding the boys that the law wouldn't be so forgiving. At 12, Robert tried again, this time legally, selling boxes of candy door to door in his neighborhood. He learned about hard work, but also something deeper. To succeed, he had to understand what people wanted. After graduating high school in 1965, he enrolled at the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy in New York. A few years later, he worked briefly for Standard Oil, but quit after 6 months and joined the U.S. Marine Corps as a helicopter pilot, serving in the Vietnam War. There, under pressure, he developed a strong sense of strategy and teamwork. Years later, when the war ended and he returned to civilian life, Kiyosaki got a job at Xerox as a salesman. Selling photocopiers helped him sharpen his communication and sales skills, tools that would become essential later on. But 2 years in, the routine of corporate life pushed him toward entrepreneurship. In 1977, at the age of 30, he founded Rippers, a company that made nylon and Velcro wallets. It was a bold idea. Nylon was new and modern, and leather wallets were the norm. At first, Rippers was a hit. The wallets were sold in major retail stores. But as competition grew and Kiyosaki struggled with managing growth, the business eventually failed. Though the exact date is unclear, it's believed the company went bankrupt around 1978. Not giving up, he launched a new venture in the fashion world, a sportswear and accessories company. But once again, lack of experience and underpriced competition drove it into bankruptcy by 1980. 5 years later, in 1985, having learned through trial and error, Kiyosaki co-founded the Accelerated Learning Institute with his wife. It was a financial education company where he began teaching business skills based on his own successes and failures. But this raised a tough question. How could a man who hadn't built a thriving business teach others about success? Truth is, he couldn't teach how to build a billion-dollar company, but he could teach what failure had taught him. Kiyosaki began to understand that teaching isn't about being flawless. It's about passing on the lessons you've earned the hard way. This time, the business worked. After nearly a decade running seminars on sales, leadership, and business, he sold his stake in 1994 to aim for something even bigger. What happened next isn't fully clear. There's no official record of when he bought his first properties, but sources suggest he began living off rental income soon after. That business success had allowed him to invest in enough real estate to create a reliable stream of cash flow. In 1997, Kiyosaki founded Cash Flow Technologies, Inc., a financial education firm focused on personal finance and entrepreneurship. The company's success gave him the capital to begin expanding his real estate portfolio. His path to wealth had finally gained momentum. Back in 1992, he had released his first book, If You Want to Be Rich and Happy, Don't Go to School, where he challenged the idea that college was the only road to success. He encouraged parents to steer their kids into real estate instead. Though it wasn't a bestseller, it helped him hone the storytelling skills that would define his career. That storytelling peaked with Rich Dad, Poor Dad in 1997, which became a global phenomenon. It sold over 32 million copies, sharing Kiyosaki's personal story and lessons from his two dads. But critics questioned the book's authenticity. Many believed it was more fable than fact. Whatever the case, the book's massive success became the foundation of his brand. He traveled the world, hosted seminars, and earned hundreds of thousands in speaking fees. But it's important to recognize, his fortune wasn't built only through real estate. His more controversial strategy was to sell books and courses, then use the profits as leverage to get loans and buy property. That's why some see him more as a course seller or even a scammer than a real estate mogul. Between 2000 and 2008, Kiyosaki focused on acquiring commercial and residential properties using leverage, capitalizing on low interest rates. He expanded his Rich Dad brand globally through books, workshops, and the Cash Flow board game, promoting financial education. Even during the 2008 crisis, while others panicked, Kiyosaki bought. That year, he purchased a 300-unit apartment complex in Tulsa, Oklahoma for $17 million, boosting his cash flow mid-recession. He didn't stop there. He diversified into high-end real estate, luxury hotels, golf courses, and large developments. In 2008, he bought a major resort in Arizona for $46 million during foreclosure, turning a crisis into opportunity. By 2011, he invested in a 2,000-unit apartment project, generating around $250,000 per month in passive income. Then, in May 2015, he made one of his boldest moves yet, buying a 1,600-unit complex for $80 million. That same year, he refinanced a $300 million loan at just 2.5% interest, maximizing profitability. By 2016, he controlled over 10,000 apartment units, earning millions in monthly cash flow. His strategy of buying during downturns and capitalizing on cheap credit became his real estate playbook. But Kiyosaki didn't stop at real estate. Since the late 90s, he also invested in oil, owning drilling operations in Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma. Unlike most investors, he avoided big oil companies, preferring to buy wells directly. Through real estate and oil, Kiyosaki showed his talent for thriving during crises. He diversified his income and built a steady flow of cash. By then, he had wealth, fame, and power. But like all great stories, it wasn't all perfect. Kiyosaki's journey was not without controversy. Over the years, critics slammed his seminars for lacking useful content. His ties to multi-level marketing only deepened skepticism around his methods. His public image took a hit. Then came a turning point. On August 7, 2012, his company, Rich Global LLC, was sued by Learning Annex, the seminar company that had helped launch Rich Dad Poor Dad. They claimed he failed to pay agreed-upon commissions. A court sided with them. Kiyosaki was ordered to pay nearly $24 million. Faced with this financial blow, he declared Rich Global LLC bankrupt, dissolving the company to avoid paying the full amount. But the bankruptcy only affected that single entity. His personal wealth and his main company, Rich Dad Company, remained untouched. Despite the bad press, his business didn't suffer much. Fans kept showing up to his events. Books kept selling. Real estate kept flowing. To date, Kiyosaki has published over 26 books, sold more than 40 million copies, and controls over 15,000 rental units. With a net worth north of $100 million, he proudly calls himself a billionaire in debt. And so ends the story of Robert Kiyosaki, a man who, despite the criticism and setbacks, never stopped moving forward. Whether through real estate, books, or seminars, he's built a fortune many would envy. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Kiyosaki's journey, make sure to subscribe and let us know in the comments what you think of his story. Until next time.